Hi, fourth graders. I hope everyone had a great weekend. We're going to be continuing our fiction unit today, and we have a new fiction book. Remember, fiction is fake. It is not true. And we're going to be diving into traditional literature today. So this genre is a lot of myths and legends and fables and folk tales of stories passed down from generation to generation. So we are going to be reading King Midas and the Golden Touch. Some of you might have read a version of this story before. So this is a myth because it's been passed down from generation to generation. There are a lot of different types of King Midas books out there. We're going to be reading the one by Charlotte Craft. And today we're going to be focusing on a few things. As I'm reading, I want you to pay close attention to the literary language, and that's that descriptive detail and adjectives that help you visualize or picture in your mind what's happening in the story. We did that with Rough Face Girl. I also want you to think about the cultural language because remember, this story has been passed down from long ago, generation to generation. So I want you to think about like the Korean Cinderella and how we had the Tagabis, the magical creatures that helped Pear Blossom. That's cultural language. That is a Korean word that is included in the story. So I want you to pay close attention to that as well. And then third, we're going to be looking at the strong characters, especially our main character. Our main character in the story is King Midas, and you will see that he has a very, very strong personality and sense about him. So we are going to be stopping throughout the story to look at different examples of this. I want you to be paying attention and seeing if you can find examples on your own. We are going to read half of the text today, and then we're going to finish the book tomorrow and do a story map about how our character grows and changes throughout this myth. So remember, we're reading a traditional literature short story, which is a genre of fiction, and it is a myth. And I also want you to pay close attention to how the story starts out. So King Midas and the Golden Touch, as told by Charlotte Craft and illustrated by K.Y. Craft. I do love the illustrations in this book as well. Okay. And I'm going to zoom in just a little bit so that you can see the text. There once lived a very rich king called King Midas who believed nothing was more precious than gold. He loved his soft yellow hue and his comforting weight in the palm of his hand. The clink of gold coins dropped into a leather purse sounded sweeter to him than the songs of the finest musicians. There was only one thing Midas loved more, and that was his daughter, Aurelia. Aurelia, he often told her as she played by the throne, someday I shall bequeath to be you the greatest treasury of gold in all the world. And that's him pretty much saying he's going to pass this down and she will have all of this one day. And as you can see how the story starts out, there once lived a very rich king called Midas. So when we have those stories like that start out with once in a land far, far away, once upon a time, there once lived a very rich king. These are all examples of literary language. And it kind of gives us a hint that it is a myth or a fable or a folk tale. And here's our picture of King Midas in his castle and Aurelia. There had been a time, however, when King Midas loved roses as much as he now loved gold. He had once called together the best gardeners in his realm, that's his land, and the garden they created for him became re-owned for the beauty and variety of its roses. But in time, the delicate fragrances, those are the smells, and exquisite colors, the beautiful colors, meant nothing to Midas. Only Aurelia still loved the garden. Every day she would pick a bouquet of the most perfect roses to adorn the king's breakfast table. So she would pick those roses to put on the breakfast table. But when Midas saw the flowers, he would think, their beauty lasts but a day. If they were gold, they would last forever. One day the king's guards found an old man asleep under the rose bushes and brought him to King Midas. Unbind him, that means like unhook him, Midas ordered. Without my gold, I would be as poor as he. Tonight he shall dine with me. So that night the old man sat at the king's table, where he was well fed and entertained by the king himself. And after a good night's sleep, the old man went on his way. So you can see the old man in the rose bushes. We've learned so far that King Midas really loves gold and seems to talk about gold a lot, but he also seems like a kind man. He brought in this old man who doesn't seem to have a home. He fed him and entertained him. So he does have a kind heart. And here is the picture of this taking place, the dinner. That morning, as he often did, when Midas went down into his dungeon, with a large brass key, he unlocked the door to the secret chamber. The dungeon is like the basement where he kept his gold. After carefully locking the door behind him, he sat down to admire his precious wealth. So he sat there just to look at it and admire all of the gold he had. Ah, I do love it so, he sighed, gazing at his riches. No matter how hard I work, no matter how long I live, I will never have enough. So he says, no matter how long he lives, no matter how old he is, no matter how much he has, he's never going to have enough gold. And that's a lot of gold because we can see that he already has a lot and he still wants more. I want you to think about a word or an adjective that would, or a character trait that would describe how King Midas feels about gold, how he keeps wanting more. He was lost in these thoughts when the chamber suddenly filled with light. King Midas looked up and was amazed to behold the glowing figure of a young man. You can see in the illustration right here. Since there was no way into the room but through the locked door, Midas knew he was in the presence of magic. Do you not recognize me, my friend? Midas shook his head. The mysterious stranger smiled at him, and it seemed that all the gold in the dungeon glittered even brighter. I am the old man from the rose garden. Instead of punishing me for trespassing means entering a place where you're not supposed to be, you entertained me at your table. I had thought to reward you for your kindness, but with so much gold, you must surely want for nothing. So we just learned that that old man was actually, this was magic, and he was actually almost like, reminds me of like a genie or something. That's not true, cried Midas. A man can never have enough gold. The stranger's smile broadened. Well then, what would make you a happier man? Midas thought for only a minute. Perhaps if everything I touched would turn to gold, he said. That is your wish? So he's asking. Yes, for then I would always it would always be at my fingertips, Midas assured him. Think carefully, my friend, cautioned the visitor. Yes, replied Midas. The golden touch would bring me all the happiness I need. And so it shall be yours. Okay, so I want you to think carefully for a second. What might be the problem with King Midas's wish? What do you think? What is the problem with the golden touch? Everything turning to gold. Write that down on your whiteboard. Think about that. And I'm also curious, how did this stranger get into the dungeon? Remember, we said the dungeon was a basement. We obviously now see that this man is a magical creature, like I said, almost like a genie who is bringing him some type of wish. Let's read to find out what happens next. With that, the mysterious figure became brighter and brighter until the light became so intense that Midas had to close his eyes. When he opened them, he was alone once again. Had the enchantment worked? The enchantment was like the wish. Midas eagerly rubbed the brass door key, but was greatly disappointed. There was no gold in his hands. Bewildered, which means confused, he looked around the dim room and wondered if perhaps he had been dreaming. I wonder. But when King Midas awoke the next day, he found his bedchamber. And remember, we had chamber as one of our vocabulary words a couple of weeks ago, and that is a great example, his fancy bedroom. He found his bedchamber bathed in golden light. Glistening in the morning sun, the plain linen bed covers had been transformed into finely spun gold. There it is. Jumping out of bed, he gasped in astonishment. He was so surprised. The bedpost turned to gold as soon as he touched it. "It's true," he cried. "I have the golden touch." Midas pulled on his clothes. He was thrilled to find himself wearing a handsome suit of gold. Never mind that it was a bit heavy. He slid his spectacles, those are his glasses, onto his nose. To his delight, they too turned to gold. Never mind that he couldn't see through them. With a gift as great as him, he thought, no inconvenience could be too great. So it is inconvenient that now everything he's wearing is very heavy. His glasses he can no longer see out of because they're gold. He said, that's okay. Without wasting another moment, Midas rushed out of the room, through the palace, and into the garden. Whew. Well, he seems really happy, doesn't he, about having the golden touch. He was astonished and surprised, but he's really excited and really happy. And the first place he runs to is the garden. Let's read to find out what happens. Actually, I'm going to show you the next picture, and I want you to make a prediction of what you think is going to happen, and as you can see, what is happening. And this is where we're going to stop for the day, and we will continue the rest of the book tomorrow. So I'm just going to show you this page, which is a full illustration. And I want you to make a prediction of what you think is going to happen as we continue to read the story. You can see King Midas right down here. Take a look at the full picture. And then I also want you to write down something that you've learned so far about our main character. What is something that we know so far about him, a character trait, a personality trait? Because remember, we're discussing strong characters, and we know that King Midas has a very strong personality. So what's something that you've learned about him so far? And then finally, I want you to give me one example of either literary language or cultural language that has been used in the book. That might be a little harder, but see if you can write something down. We did talk about a few things. All right, my friends, I can't wait to read to find out what happens to King Midas as we continue on Tuesday. I hope everyone has a great afternoon. Get your reading log done. Watch the vocabulary. You need to get your vocabulary game completed by Thursday in preparation for your vocabulary test on Friday. Bye, friends.